Hey, welcome to Digging Deep, an Ortiz Squared podcast with former Major League All-Star Russ Ortiz and sports writer Jesus Ortiz. Russ, how are you?
I'm great. I'm great. It's good to be back here with you. So it's good to see you. And I know we talk a lot on text and some on the phone and stuff, but yeah, it's good to finally see you again.
Well, it's good to see you. What an amazing time. I thought of you last night. I know Manuel Gomez thought of you as well. Uh, Dusty Baker, should he have pulled McCullers? Was Lance McCullers tipping? 20 years ago, he pulled you, gave you the baseball, and the Angels came back and beat you guys, and then beat you guys again the next day, and you guys didn't win that World Series. And there's been a lot of talk here in Houston and Philadelphia managing pitchers. The Astros
Sure.
had a 5-0 lead in Game 1. They blew it. Justin Verlander was clearly struggling, as somehow he's prone to do in the World Series, one of the greatest pitchers of our time,
Right.
of his generation, and he's the worst pitcher in Major League history in World Series among guys who've thrown 30 innings in the World Series. What are your thoughts on yesterday's game? You were watching. You disagree on the tipping part. You don't think the tipping part was as big of an issue. But tell us, what did you see yesterday?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say, I hate not that you're trying to do this, but just in general, the talk about Dusty, because it's been going on for 20 years. And so, and it's still there. And so, I've always been rooting for Dusty and rooting hard for him as a manager to get a World Series ring. And so that's number one. But as far as yesterday, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of discussion about, possible tipping pitches that, and so as a former pitcher, I was saying, I get where they're going with that, but at the same time, because he was getting hit and gave up, 5 home runs, why does it have to be tipping? I mean, if you look at the location of the pitches, there weren't very good pitches at all, and they were, hanging, spinning sliders, hanging curveballs, not very good changeups, and I think that one was a sinker that just went flat across the plate. So they weren't very good pitches, and so for me, I would just like to take a look at that first, and then go from there, because at the end of the day, pitchers just have bad games. They have a bad plan. They have a hard time, getting the pitches where they want to, and you're facing major league hitters, and these guys are just going to tattoo you if you leave them hanging over the plate. And so I understand what they're talking about, but we also have to realize, for hitters to be able to determine whether or not, okay, during his windup or in the stretch during his motion, if he's doing a certain thing, then try to pick up the ball out of the hand and then decide, okay, well, which pitch is it? Is it the slider, curveball, or changeup? If you're going or sinker. And I think we have to understand that's really hard to do. Not every hitter can do that. There's plenty of hitters, when I was playing, that were guys on second base, and they knew the signs. They picked apart the sequence the catcher was given, and they knew the signs. And some hitters would say, "Don't tell me. I don't want to know, because I don't want to look at you, what you're giving me, and then try to refocus myself on the pitcher and the ball out of the hand and all that stuff." And so for some guys, it's just too much going on. So obviously the reason why it's being talked about is because Bryce Harper called hitter. I forget his name. Is it Bohm?
Yeah, so
Yeah. So he called him over and said something to him, and then they interviewed him, after the fact in the dugout and said that's between us. And so all of a sudden it was, well, he must be tipping pitches. Well, one of the things you have to realize is the first batter, Kyle Schwarber, he threw them all sliders, all breaking pitches, and walked them. So now he's out of the stretch. So whatever they saw out of the windup is going to be different from what they see out of the stretch. Bryce Harper comes up, he throws the first pitch curveball, he hits it out. So whatever Bryce Harper saw, if he saw something and was going to tell the other guy, it may be different because when that one particular hitter, when he came up, I believe it was the first. I believe he was out of the windup, and yeah, because it was a solo home run, and so it was out of the windup. So what he would have seen and what Bryce Harper would have seen would have been two different things. So that's why I was like, I don't know if it's so much tipping. Now, do I know that for sure? No, but I liked what John Smoltz said towards the end of the game is, when you are throwing pitches that aren't great, located well, that are spinning, that are flat, and they're essentially the same speed. So if you have a pitcher throwing all his pitches at the same speed in the same areas, and they're not very good pitches, major league hitters are just going to tee off on that. And I think more so that's what happened than anything.
And you mentioned Urquidy. You like the way Urquidy attacked the Phillies. He used his fastball. And
Right.
What do you think? Do you think the Phillies are a good fastball? Because they're clearly a good breaking ball, especially Harper, right? Like,
right.
Would you have changed your approach moving forward to, hey, let's challenge these guys with fastballs instead of as many breaking pitches? What would you do?
Well, I think, Urquidy, I mean, he throws 92, 93 tops, so nothing really overpowering, but he uses fastball very well. And then he got guys out a lot on off-speed stuff because they now had to look for the fastball so his fastball was effective. McCullers' fastball, his sinker wasn't effective at all. And one thing I learned early on in my career is that major league hitters are going to eliminate pitches. So if one pitch is not very effective at all, they're going to eliminate that and they're going to start keying on other pitches. And so until you can show them that you can be effective again with a particular pitch, in this case, I think his sinker, they're not even going to worry about it. And so, I think that plays into it. And I think one thing, I liked about Urquidy is that he was very effective with his fastball, both sides of the plate, up and down, and that made his other pitches even more effective. He didn't have to be as perfect with his other pitches, and he was very effective. But if you did notice his 92 mile an hour fastball, they couldn't catch up with it. And so you asked the question, do I think the Phillies are a good fastball hitting team or more, or not? And I was like, well, the games that I've seen throughout the playoffs, they have been more effective. They have hurt other teams more with off-speed pitches. The part of the first game that I saw that Verlander got hurt was more off-speed pitches. He throws very hard. And when he was throwing his fastball, and he was doing great. What I saw is he went away from that and started throwing breaking balls, off-speed pitches, and then that's when they started hitting him. And I'm pretty sure once that changed, that played into Philadelphia's strength. And so, and that's what I noticed right there, that he was being very effective with his fastball, throwing it upper 90s, and they weren't hitting him. And then he gave them slower pitches, change-ups, breaking balls, sliders, what have you, and it gave them an opportunity, that they didn't have before. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I saw that change in that momentum swing. And then of course they ended up, tying the game and winning the game. And so yesterday I think right off the bat in the first 3 hitters, you could tell McCullers was going to be off speed heavy to the lefties. And it was going to be probably 95% off speed and 5% maybe sinker to the lefties. I think that was very evident right from the get-go. And then to the righties, he just wasn't very effective with the sinker. And then so if he didn't get his other pitches where he wanted them to be, I think that's what ended up happening is that, because what's his name? The first baseman, Reese.
For who? For the
Phillies.
Astros?
No, for the Phillies.
Hoskins?
Yeah. He hit I think a spinning slider. It was down, but it was right over the middle of the plate. And you could tell that he was just sitting on that pitch. There was no indication that he was looking fastball and then adjusted to, and at least to my eyes. And so I think they just knew his plan right away. And McCullers just had one of those nights. And so I kind of was like, well, why does it have to be about tipping pitches because a guy had a bad night? And because he could essentially be able to possibly come back, execute his pitches and have a great night. And then what are people going to say? Oh, he fixes him tipping pitches. Like, that's really hard to do in a matter of a few days, to all of a sudden fix your mechanics and stuff and all that. So that's why I'm not leaning towards, tipping so much.
Awesome. You're listening to Digging Deep, an Ortiz Squared podcast with former Major League All-Star Russ Ortiz and sports writer Jesus Ortiz. Russ, you played for Dusty Baker.
Right.
The guys talk about doing it for Dusty Baker. Do it for Dusty Baker was the rallying cry after they won the ALCS. Why do people love Dusty Baker so much? Why do his players love this man? Why do you love Dusty?
Well, that's a number of things. One, he's passionate about the game. He loves the game. And I appreciate that. I've always appreciated that in a manager, someone that just has a passion for the game. And he loves winning, like all managers do. But just added with that passion, you get that energy, every game. And I think that's very important. One of the other things that I've thought about, just having conversations with other people or interviews, throughout this World Series time was that I've always appreciated that he never put any pressure on the players to perform. And what I mean by that is, from day one, he asked the players to be ready, be prepared, and make sure that you're doing everything you can to win. And so, and playing with together, having each other's backs, all that stuff. So he, that's something that he preaches from day one. And I think you see that throughout the season. And then once you get to playoff time, the tendency, because of the media and the attention, and especially when you get to the World Series, the attention is, you know, 10 times, 100 times more focused, on those two teams than it is during, any part of the regular season. So, but Dusty doesn't have, you know, the energy that he puts out is not of worry or panic or nervousness or anything like that, or pressure. And so I think that's one of the things that he's great at, is that he doesn't he doesn't make players feel like there's pressure on them to perform. And so I think, those things, and he gets to know the players, he gets to know them personally on their level, what their interests are, et cetera. And so he's just a well-rounded, manager that you just love to play for, and that just has a passion for the game just as much as the players do.
And you've mentioned many times how he really did get to know, and Dusty's mentioned it, that with the COVID, it hasn't been like it was in San Francisco or Cincinnati or
Right.
Washington or Chicago, because usually he knows the wife's names, the kids' names, And you shared a story once how he got to know your grandparents.
Right.
How cool was that? Just him caring enough to go meet them.
It was awesome. I mean, I think in the minor leagues, your experiences with the managers uh, are basically, it's pretty much, business. I mean, it's rare. I think, no fault to the managers, but I think it's just rare to have like real relationships with your managers. And then you kind of hear whispers of like, this is a big league way. This is, managers don't associate with the players, and all that stuff. Managers and coaches are up in front of the plane, players in the back. Managers and coaches don't come back to the back of the plane and mix in with the players. So that's what you hear. Even if you're at a hotel and there's and then the hotel has a lounge, and you wanted to go down there to have a drink or hang out, and you see any coaches or managers, you got to go somewhere else, especially the manager. Like, you have to go somewhere else. You're not, so that you get that sense of you just don't
Socialize,
fraternize, with managers and coaches. And so you hear that, but then once I got to the big leagues, you started to notice that Dusty wants to get to know the players. Yeah, there's lines that he's not going to cross it, because it's still business. He's still your manager, and he's still an authority figure. But all in all, he's wanting to know what makes you tick. And for me, my mom, my brother, my grandparents are very important, have been very important to me all my whole life. And so he understood that. And so I appreciated the fact that, he did take the time, getting to know me. Once he's getting to know me, to get to know the people that are most important in my life. And because that's what makes me tick. That's what made me go. That's where the passion, for the game came from. And all that stuff. And so that was the biggest thing that I've always appreciated. And then he knew their names, and he spoke, he speaks Spanish. And my grandparents, my grandpa especially, spoke Spanish. And so he was able to have, a conversation with him as well. And, you as a Latino know that, and my grandpa appreciated that. When he was when Dusty made that effort to speak to him in Spanish, and so it was great to see, and that made my grandpa feel special, and that's the stuff that I really appreciate.
When we talk about some of Dusty, I wrote a story the Do It for Dusty story, and I compare him to like a Forrest Gump. of Major League Baseball in the sense that
Okay.
he touches so many different moments.
Yeah.
From Hank Aaron to Fernando Valenzuela to Barry Bonds and Steve Bartman. It's like whenever anything crazy or amazing happened in baseball, Dusty seemed to be there. Invented the high five, credited with inventing the high five. Like was there for Bartman and led 5 teams to the playoffs. The only manager to do that. Um, you know, he's missing that World Series, and you were as close to a World Series title as he's ever gotten.
Yeah.
Take us back to Game 6 of the 2002 World Series. What's going on? What does he tell you? And where is that baseball, that infamous baseball?
Well, so I had a horrible game, game 2 in Anaheim. And, I wasn't happy, of course. And I was just hoping I'd get another opportunity. And I can't remember. I'm sure Dusty and I had a conversation in between game 2 and game 6, but at no time did I ever get the feeling that he was kind of maybe rethinking, his rotation, and so that gave me confidence to know and I feel like I had a great plan, and this goes to the whole tipping thing as well. I feel like I had a great plan with my catcher, but I didn't execute, and I got shellacked for I think 6 runs in 2 innings, and and I got out. The fortunate thing for us, the other pitcher didn't have a good night either. So I think it was like 6-6 after 2 innings. And so, but I felt like I had the right plan with my catcher. And so now I was just hoping I get another opportunity. And
who was your catcher, by the way?
Benito Santiago.
Okay.
Yeah. And he was really easy to work with. And he, by that time, obviously, he knew me well, and he knew all his pitchers well. And, that I would say the only thing that I had to get used to with Benito was he moves a lot. Once he gives a sign, then he moves a lot to get ready. He's just this real fluid motion. And so I had to get used to that. And so by that time, it was no big deal, but we worked well together. And I loved his energy. I mean, he brought a lot of energy to the field as well. And so, so I just was hoping for another opportunity, and I got that opportunity in game 6. And some of the stuff in game 2, I wanted to do really well, and so I put pressure on myself to do really well and try to overthrow, et cetera. So I promised myself I wasn't going to do that. I was just going to go pitch by pitch and just execute every pitch and not worry about the external stuff. And so, and that's what happened. I was able to start the game like that and continue, up through into the 7th inning. And, I think really the first time that I felt like I was a little off was the first 2 pitches in the 7th inning to Garrett Anderson, which I went 2-0. And then I got right back into it. I kind of took some time and reminded myself, hey, you promised yourself that you were not going to worry about any external anything. And so I got back on it, threw a solid pitch over, and he grounded out to second base. And it was like, all right, here we go. And so then I executed my pitch to the next guy, Troy Gloss, and he hits a line drive single over shortstop. No big deal. Anybody knows if you're going to give up anything to Troy Gloss and he hits a single, who cares? He can hit singles all day long. So, so no big deal. Now I have a lefty, and I know how to get a ground ball of him. I got a ground ball. I just didn't get it out enough. I probably about 3 or 4 inches more outside. I think I get him a ground ball to second base, which was I was trying to do. But he, I left it out just a little too much. I got the ground ball, but he hit it hard enough to get it through between first and second, and then that's when I got taken out. And so But in my mind, I was preparing for Scott Spezio. Again, knowing I knew how I could get him out, how I could even get a ground ball. And so in my mind, I'm preparing. And to this day, I tell people, something changed in the kind of the mood of the game. That just something was different. And once I noticed that that time had been called, then that's when I looked over. I swear I saw Dusty's right arm go up to call the bullpen. So right then, you're out. That pitcher's out. Once he makes a call to the bullpen, you're done. So I didn't even think about trying to negotiate to stay in the game because I thought I was out. And so the guys came up and told me a great job and stuff. But I went back and looked at the video. I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, and I don't think he actually called the bullpen then. So then and once I found that out, if I'm correct that to be true, then I was like, man, I could have probably negotiated with them to let me face this one guy and to get a ground ball. But it may not have worked, but at least I would have had an opportunity. And so, but anyway, so he took me out. He said, said, great job. I mean, he didn't say a whole lot. And I walked off, and he stopped me and said, here, I want you to have this. And that's all he said. And I said, okay. That was one of those games where you dream about as far as being in the zone. And so it wasn't until I got about halfway to the dugout where I stopped being in the zone. Because even when he stopped me, if anybody's to see the video, I just look at him and say, okay, and then walk off like a little robot. But I was still kind of in the zone. And once like I said, it got about halfway to the dugout. That's the first time I really heard the crowd and how loud it was, with all the thunder sticks and all that stuff. And I was just amazed. I was like, this is unbelievable. But I thought at the same time it was really cool because I didn't hear that at all. I heard some background noise, but I didn't hear how loud it got. It didn't bother me.
You were just working.
I was just doing my thing. And so to me, that ball is a special thing. It's a reminder. It's a bad reminder for a lot of, San Francisco fans, a lot of, fans of me as a player, or, the Giants players and Dusty and stuff like that. It's a
like almost tempting fate, right? Like, because you normally don't give somebody the ball after. Once you give up the ball, you never give it back. Has anybody ever given you the ball back after they pulled you?
No, that's never happened. And and Dusty and I sat down because he was getting so much flack for that. And when we got back to San Francisco, he called me into his office and he just said, like, look, I just wanted you to have a souvenir from a World Series that you pitched in. And that was it, and it got made out to be, and it's still to this day, it's one of those things that still gets obviously talked about. So I've always looked at it as like how, that's pretty cool to have the actual ball that you pitched in a World Series game with, in your possession. And I just think about, how many guys could actually say that, a lot of us will go into a lot of us, I think if you wanted to buy, baseballs, you could purchase, dozens of baseballs with the World Series logo on it. But a lot of us, will just go grab a couple from the bucket on our own, just as keepsakes. So a lot of people may have keepsakes, but to actually have a rubbed up used ball that that I was throwing pitches with, I thought it was pretty cool. And, I didn't read anything into it. I didn't think for 1 second that, oh, he's giving me a game ball or anything like that. And so it's just Dusty being Dusty, him thinking about, me and, for him to think about something like that at that point in time, I thought, that kind of encapsulates, who Dusty Baker is and the type of person that he is.
Who are you rooting for in this World Series?
I'm rooting for Dusty and the Astros. I would like to, see him win a World Series. I fully believe that he's had a Hall of Fame, managerial career, and this would just, kind of be that icing on the cake, and whether he feels it or not, just kind of have that weight off his shoulders, and so so I'd like to see them win. I don't have really any real horse in the race as far as teams are concerned, but plus I had a little 3/4 of a season stint with the Astros, and so I appreciate every organization that gave me a chance, and so that adds to it. So I would really like to see the Astros, mainly because of Dusty being the manager, and then I got to play for Houston, proudly in 2009.
You're listening to Digging Deep, an Ortiz Squared podcast with former Major League All-Star Russ Ortiz and sports writer Jesus Ortiz. Russ, I'll ask you one final question to cap off this. Out of all the places you've played, where do Phillies fans stand in as far as best fans, worst fans, biggest jerks, a-holes, as the legendary
spot here? Yeah, I like it.
The legendary Jim McInville, 71-year-old businessman, furniture salesman, gallery furniture, a guy who's opened up his furniture store for thousands of Houstonians after natural disasters here. Beloved figure. When they show him on the big screen at Minute Maid Park, he gets some of the loudest ovations, louder than some athletes, some Astros actually. Wow. How hard is it to pitch in Philadelphia, and if not, how hard is the worst fans or the toughest fans? Who are your top 5 worst fans to pitch against?
Well, I won't say worst fan. I'll say the most passionate for their team. Philly is definitely one of them. I mean, they do everything in their power to get in your head, and and I've seen fans over the bullpen throw stuff, at guys in the bullpen, and I mean, just about every visiting stadium, when you go on the road, there's a ton of obscenities, being said. So it's not they do that the best, but I think they're one of the best at trying to get in your head, and are just, very stubborn, when it comes to stopping and not giving up. And so I think they're one of the best at just saying everything and anything they can to get in your head. And I think they do a very good job of that. Now, as far as, throwing stuff and all that, that's all uncalled for and should never happen. But I heard about Philly fans from day one of just how brutal they can be. And some guys love it, and some guys, it gets in their head, and they can't handle it. And so
what's the worst thing any fans ever yelled at you, and have you ever wanted to go kick somebody's butt?
So I had an incident, and I can't, as far as all the obscenities and stuff, everybody says, hey, you suck, and all that stuff. That's kind of the go-to for fans, is to tell you that you suck, and you're like, all right, whatever, that doesn't affect you. But one time when I was in Baltimore, I'd gotten hurt in Arizona with my rib, and when I came back in 2006, I wasn't good at all, and I'm still trying to figure out, how the heck I went from throwing low to mid 90s to mid 80s. And so after the D-backs released me, I went to Baltimore because Leo Mazzoni, who's my pitching coach in Atlanta, was there, and they gave me an opportunity, and so they gave me some starts. I didn't do well because, again, I was throwing mid 80s and got knocked around. Well, they put me in the bullpen. So the rest of the year, I was in the bullpen, and there was one time where I was doing decent. My velocity was back up, and I was doing decent. And there was just some things that, a couple times it didn't go well, whatever. Anyways, I didn't pitch very much out of the bullpen in Baltimore anyways. But there was one time I was walking to the bullpen, and this guy, says, like, you're terrible. You should just quit. Why don't you just go home? And there was a lot of, F-bombs and all that stuff. And so for whatever reason, I noticed that he had a kid with him, right next to him. So for whatever reason, I've never done this, but for whatever reason, I stopped. I turned around and said, who said that? Who said that? And there, and all these guys are just looking around, like, I wonder who said that. And I said, no, honestly, you're going to be man enough to say stuff like that. Be man enough to say who said it. And so a guy says, I did. It's like, okay. I said, what's the purpose of all that? And I forget what he said. And I was like, is this your son? He's like, yeah. I was like, so is this the example that you want to set for your son to do this? I was like, I don't have to explain it to you, but I will. Like, I'm doing everything I can to be as best I can to help this team win, all that stuff. I hate losing. I hate doing bad, all that stuff. I don't mind if you say things like that. I go, but when you get personal, and then I see you doing that next to your, who could be possibly your son, I was like, that's the kind of stuff that bothers me. I was like, that's not a good example to set for your son and all that stuff. So at the end, he's just like, man, I'm so sorry. I should have done that. And so he apologized, and we shook hands and all that stuff. And but that's probably the only experience that I've had with a fan where I've actually, went back and forth with them, because otherwise it's just fans spouting off, trying to get in your head, and it comes with the territory. And, but I will say that the hardest thing for me, at least, is when your own fans boo you, and I've had that happen once in San Francisco, and then once in Arizona. I was one half of the season in San Francisco, I wasn't good at all. And then the year after I got hurt with my rib in 2006, I was terrible, like I said. And so for me, that was always the hardest thing is to get booed by your own fans, and I understand, but at the same time, it was tough.
Well, thank you. You've listened to Digging Deep, an Ortiz Sport podcast with former Major League All-Star Russ Ortiz and sports writer Jesus Ortiz. Russ, it was great to get back on here. Let's do it more often. Thank you very much.
We need to get on doing a lot more this off season, and then feeding into the next season. I know both of us, just our schedules sometimes don't gel, but this is great. Obviously, I love this, and we've had some tremendous guests and conversations with not only just us, but with our great guests. And so I know you and I desire to do that. So I think we should get a lot more done this off season, when we both have more time.
I'd love it. Thank you very much, Russ. I'll be texting you.
All right,
this podcast episode was produced by our Esquina podcast director, Manny Gomez. Thank you very much. We will see you soon. Adios.